Welcome to the first ever Sledgehammer books. I'm your host, Dr. Sledgehammer, and today I want to talk about Shadowrun. Never Deal with a Dragon. Now, you're probably asking yourself, why am I suddenly reviewing a book? Well, let's start off by saying I'm not much of a novels reader. I read lots of research articles in my day job, so I prefer a different type of entertainment medium in my leisure time, like a TV series, a movie, or some video game perhaps. I did, however, read a large amount of self-finance books in order to know how to grow my wealth a little bit better, and I developed kind of a speed reading technique with which I could finish books much faster. You know, the one where you follow your finger at a constant rate and you skip over some words, reading every other word in the sentence? Yeah, that one. That being said, I felt like I really need to read this book in order to do some research for a video game review that I'm working on, so I might as well tell you about it. So let's have a look, shall we? The book is part of a Shadowrun's book trilogy called The Secret of Power. It was written by Overture, one of the co-creators of the Shadowrun Pen and Paper game that is still quite popular to this day. You might see people playing the game all over the world. For reference, look at the Reddit community. It has over 40,000 members and is still growing. It is the first novel ever written about the Shadowrun universe, which means that this book right here is tasked with inviting newcomers as well as fans of the pen and paper game into the Shadowrun world, while at the same time telling a compelling story that starts off an entire book series that expands upon the existing Shadowrun universe. Now that is a rather tall order if you ask me. And nobody did it better than J.K. Rowling did in her Harry Potter series. I mean, she introduced us to the magical world of Harry Potter such a nice way. I mean, we had such fulfilled childhoods with these books. They spanned over 2 decades, had 7 main entries, and countless spin-offs. So I will be making comparisons between both series. And while we're at it, spoiler warning, as usually, I will give away some plot points, but not everything. So yeah, you have been warned. So without further ado, let's get right into the plot, shall we? The world of Shadowrun is more or less a parallel universe to our own, in which thousands of years ago, in an era called the Fourth World, magical creatures and metahuman resided the Earth together with us. At some point in time, magic vanished from the world, ushering in the so-called Fifth World. During the Fifth World, everything basically happened the way you learned it in the history books. Nothing to see here, until an event occurred that we call the Awakening. Magic returned to our world around 2011. Magical creatures slowly started returning to our realm, and mothers started giving birth to metahuman like dwarves and elves. Around April 2021, a mutated virus started infecting certain individuals, causing them to mutate into other types of metahuman like orcs and trolls, a process also called goblinization. While elves were considered eye candy in general and dwarves were respected for their technical prowess, orcs and trolls had a much tougher time getting by in society and were kinda viewed by regular folks as subhuman. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, racism got real bad in the 6th world of Shadowrun. So bad that lots of wars happened that changed the entire structure of the border system as you know it. And to make matters worse, corporations got so big they stopped building their own arcologies and they started hiring private armies to protect these arcologies. Something not well explained in the novel. An arcology is a large skyscraper that got everything you need to live. Your workplace, gyms, dormitories, clubs, supermarkets, gyms, cafes, parks, and gyms. If you did not want to become a wage slave for a mega corporation, you could always go ahead and become a Shadowrunner. Social rejects who have decided to become guns for hire. You can specialize in ranged combat, close combat, magic, or hacking among other things. Most Shadowrunners usually have a bunch of physical implants to enhance their physical abilities. These implants, or cyberware as they are called, can improve reflexes, speed, eyesight, among other things.
I rebuilt everything. Every organ.
The most common piece of cyberware is the data jack, which is what hackers use to navigate in the Matrix or to rig machinery. The Matrix is a security system that functions like a virtual world in which hackers, riggers and techers navigate a virtual mannequin to steal information or manipulate security systems. Now the more cyberware you have on you, the less connected you become to your soul, which is a problem for mages. So when mages want to have cyberware on them, they're gonna have to sacrifice some of their magical power. And mages don't really need cyberware, as they have some insane firepower that they can unleash at a moment's notice. They have some other really neat tricks, however. For example, they can just go to sleep and have their souls leave their body so they can go and spy on people. They have some really neat tricks that other people usually don't have, and they're rather feared among normal mortals. Well, I think I actually summarized Shadowrun for you. So there you go. Let's have a look at the story now, shall we? Our main protagonist, Sam Werner, is a researcher at Renraku Computer Systems Corporation in Tokyo, Japan. He's waking up in the hospital after receiving a cutting-edge, spanking new data jack implant on the temple. Sam is visited by the president and vice president of the company. They both came to check on him. How very nice of them. Vice President Sato happily tells Sam that he has been transferred to the Renraku branch in Seattle, which sucks for a man who has lived his entire life in Tokyo, Japan. And he also tells Sam that his sister has caught the virus and is slowly turning into an orc or a troll. The company doesn't want Sam to see his sister because they distance themselves from such creatures, which causes one of the few scenes in which Sam actually loses his cool. Sato, by the way, is one of my favorite villains in the entire book. He is such an evil motherfucker who delivers his lines with such evil intent. He's the type of boss who would expect excellence, while at the same time he would cut the throats of anybody who fucks up. He makes zero compromise and never admits to his own mistakes. He is as cold-blooded as they come. And you know what? You know what's scary? You are gonna meet people like him all over the corporate world. Upon arriving in Seattle, Sam met a security officer called Alice Crenshaw, who was assigned to make sure that Sam got transferred to Renraku Archaeology safely. As they arrived in their commuter, Sam and Crenshaw got captured by a team of Shadowrunners led by the female mage Sally Tsong and her associates Ghost, who walks inside, who is a proud Native American street samurai, and Ham, who is a large muscular orc. He's basically that group's tank. They were robbing the archaeology and needed a way to escape. They took the commuter Sam was in and captured the passengers as hostages. A badass scene happens right here. As soon as they enter, Sally blows up the dog-like creatures into smithereens using a fireball. The security forces of Renraku start shooting at the commuter, killing some of the passengers inside. The novel is actually filled with gory scenes that would be simply beautiful if ever filmed. A fun fact that keeps being repeated throughout the entire novel: whenever somebody dies, he or she will crap their pants, and the author keeps reminding you how much it reeks. Sam rigged the commuter and helped them escape from Renraku. As soon as they got out, the Shadowrunners made clear they are not assassins and that the hostages can walk away freely after everything is done. Sam befriended the team of Shadowrunners as he helped them rectify a mistake they made in their last mission. A mistake that would have caused a large amount of casualties at Renraku Archaeology. Crenshaw developed a deep hatred towards Sam as she felt like he was part of their team now. After all is done, Sam, Crenshaw and another surviving employee are free to leave. Sam earned the Shadowrunners' respect, especially the Amerindian street samurai Ghost who walks inside, and a decker called Dodger. Well, that was the prologue. Now the book contains a prologue and 3 big chapters divided into 55 smaller sections. So the book contains a prologue and 55 small sections. Well, so much for the book and the prologue. Now let's go to the main story. During the first part of the book, Sam works as a researcher and he's slowly starting to build contempt for the company that keeps ignoring his request to see his sister. he meets a Shadowrunner named Kathrine Hart who helps him escape their ecology. The rest of the book deals with Sam slowly turning into a fully fledged Shadowrunner who is on a mission to deal with a businessman called Drake and bring him to justice. Why does he wanna do that? Well, ain't gonna tell you. You have to find out yourself. Seems straightforward. So this book must be an absolute success. It must be an holy heirloom for every Shadowrun fan around the globe, right? Wrong! The book is actually polarizing. It has some really interesting, unique characters with some really solid plot, actually. However, the author is not a good writer. For starters, you keep switching between characters. At one moment you're Sam, few pages ahead you're Crenshaw, the security officer from Renraku, then you are Kathrine Hart, the elven mage I talked about earlier. Let's look at how Harry Potter solved that problem. In both books you are actually looking at things in a third-person perspective like in a video game. In Harry Potter, however, you only have Harry's perspective. In rare occasions, real rare occasions for like a prologue or something, you have perhaps another character. But everything else, it's only Harry Potter. Switching characters means switching scenes. That means that the reader has little time to readjust to another environment, and the author does a poor job at explaining the environment in the first place. I mean, if I want to compare it to one of J.K. Rowling's books, she spends almost an entire page every time setting the scene for the reader. That is really important. We are in a not familiar place. We are actually in an unfamiliar world that we're constantly trying to familiarize ourselves with it. And the author kinda assumes that we have some Shadowrun knowledge, but we don't. For example, one of my favorite good guys in the book, Bege, came over to escort Sam over the border using a vehicle called Panzer. Now, I speak German, I know that Panzer means tank, but who comes over to pick up somebody in a tank? So I assumed it's just a motorcycle or something. But no, it is actually a tank. A flying tank, with weaponry and everything. In another scene, Crenshaw enters a bar, looking for Shadowrunners to do a job for her. And she suddenly introduces herself as Mr. Johnson. Now, I was kinda confused here. I mean, I started looking all over the page, maybe I missed something, maybe there's somebody else called Mr. Johnson who spoke, but no, it's her. She is Mr. Johnson, and this is just an alias, a clever alias to be honest, but you don't really need to trick the reader, give him some extra info to know what you're talking about. Add to that the goddamn transitions between the real world, the Matrix, and the astral plane, and you are in a whole lot of trouble. Well, let's get to the final topic. Characters. The characters are so good, they speak one or two sentences and you immediately feel like you know these people. And what amazes me is there's so many characters and they feel so different. Bege, for example, is a Native American flying tank pilot who gets quickly offended and makes you pay with his really intimidating silent treatment. I feel like I met a lot of handymen in my life with this kind of demeanor, so he's kinda realistic. He has one of the best fight scenes in the entire book. I mean, he fights a fucking dragon in a flying tank somewhere over the woods, at the border between the United States and Canada. Bege is the man! Kathrine Hart is a femme fatale that always has a smile on her face and is highly respectful until she has to kill you. A true cold-blooded professional that I enjoyed reading about. She even has the classic femme fatale scene where she seduces a scumbag and takes him up to his room to show him who's boss. Well, not exactly classic, it has some twist. You have to read it yourself to see what I mean. Crenshaw is a character that keeps trying to manipulate people into doing her bidding. She has leverage on everybody in the company and is as dirty as they come. I deeply hated Crenshaw because for the most part I felt like her hatred towards Sam was unreasonable. She wanted him dead no matter what and even committed atrocious crimes to get to him. Towards the end of the book you will start to understand her actions and you will know the reasons why she did what she did. She is one of the more complex characters in the book and she really grew on me. I like lots of other characters, but I don't want to spoil it too much for you. This leads me to Sam. The few reviews on the book that I found online suggested that he is boring, bland, and a regular Mary Sue. Well, let me confirm that. Sam is totally a Mary Sue who is protected by Deus Ex Machina. The man has only managed to learn one skill in the entire book and somehow manages to get out of everything alive, while the professionals keep dying. As for his personality, sure, you're gonna ask yourself, why is this guy so emotionless towards anything but his goddamn sister? I mean, one moment important characters to him die, and the next thing you know is he's cracking jokes and having conversations with his elven friend, Dodger. Well, here's what I think. Sam grew up in Japan, and he kinda had a Japanese upbringing despite being American. He also worked as a Japanese salaryman and learned the Japanese code of honor. He is very smart, he is composed in most occasions, very respectful to most characters. He measures each word coming out of his mouth, he rarely loses control. He becomes a little bit more cerebral as he becomes more and more a Shadowrunner. Well, I think lots of authority figures that you have in your life right now share many similar traits to what Sam has. Well, enough said. I give the book a 6 out of 10. It is a good book, it has interesting characters and a solid plot, but the author's weaknesses make the book really difficult to read. Now, I told you earlier that I developed a speed reading technique to skim through books much faster. Yeah, nobody's speed reading this, as you will keep repeating paragraphs over and over and over again. Now, would I buy and read the 2 sequel books? Maybe. I mean, I like the characters in this book and would really love to know what happens to them from this point on. Would I recommend that you buy this book? Well, you have the video, you can look at it, you have my opinion. As for why I'm reviewing this book, well, you'll find that out in the next Sledgehammer review. Bye.
I pray you allow me a few moments to coordinate my seldom used reproductive sequences.